Welcome everybody. My name's Lisa. I work at Southwark Archives and this is my colleague Jessie. Jessie works here at the Heritage Centre. And thank you all for coming. Thank you. And of course I want to warmly welcome Lois to the Q&A this afternoon. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, give a brief introduction to the school and then talk about how we thought about the idea of coming up with the idea of the school's display and highlighting the school. So Bermondsey Lamp Post School was one of Southwark's first modern free schools, started by Lois in 1972. The school started as a result of increasing dissatisfaction among the local Bermondsey community, particularly among working class parents, with the lack of, quotes, educational opportunity, play space for children of all ages and educational provision for the under fives in the Bermondsey area. That actually comes from the Bermondsey Lamp Post community newsletter of 1979. Its first premises was a flat above a sub-post office at 102 Bermondsey Street, and it would go on to inhabit other addresses including at Charterhouse in Southwark and a bakery in Long Lane. Bermondsey Lamp Post School thereafter occupied various premises, and it continued to receive telephone calls from the community to place children at school for years to come. Lois was the head of the geography department at Alwyn Secondary School in Bermondsey, now Harris Academy, in the 1970s. She was passionate about teaching and education, but disillusioned with the education system at the time. She and other education providers recognised that for some children, the mainstream school system was not working for them. Some children found the style of teaching difficult to absorb. Some children had learning difficulties not picked up at school that made it difficult for them to learn. Some lived in difficult home environments or had mental health difficulties that made it difficult for them to engage in the classroom. The result of all this was truancy and absences from mainstream school, but also children just not realising their potential. Bermondsey Lamp Post School offered holistic education that allowed children free rein to discover, learn and work in a way that was conducive to their educational and learning styles. According to Lois, the children named the school Lamp Post themselves because they felt shut out of the mainstream education system for so long, so that when this new school opened it was like a light of learning, although there is another version of the origin of the school's name which mentions that teachers were sick of being so we say yes. Something beginning with the letter S. Anyway, I'm going to read a letter by the Bermondsey Lamp Post School just to finish, to the local council in 1973. In setting up a school, we have hoped to provide an atmosphere attuned to the needs of these children, where they will feel able to relax and find an outlet for their own desires and abilities. An attempt must be made for education to become an integral and natural part of local life. Access to education must be possible for all ages. It is realised by many that the concept of the school must change, and some guidelines for the future could be provided by a model working outside the existing structure. So that was in 1973. So I was just one day searching through YouTube, as you do, and I came across this film, and I was it was one of those, what, wait, why don't people know about this school? And I thought it really deserved to be highlighted. It was really out there. It was something very unique and obviously doing wonderful things. So I looked in our own archives. I work in Southwark Archive, and I couldn't find very much on it. One or two press cuttings about this new school being opened up. And I thought, well, I wonder if I can get hold of Lois to find out, to get a history. So I searched on the website, and I found you through this Greener Festival website, and we began an engagement. It took a while for you to get back to me, but you did eventually, and we started a conversation. So what I read about you, Lois, is that you founded the Urban Unlimited and the UU Network to develop links between the creative and music industries, and as well as a previous career in teaching and a successful career in TV, working on groundbreaking programmes and events, including the launch of the Mobile Awards and ITV's Telethon 92, which raised £24 million. Lois is also a social justice and equality campaigner and passionate about music. She has managed, arranged and worked at music festivals, arts and theatre events both in the UK and abroad, including Glastonbury for many years, and with George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. I probably haven't done you justice, Lois. I probably haven't, but suffice to say, I'm really grateful that you're here today. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do is show this film, which is 11 minutes, and then we're going to ask a few questions and then open it out to you guys. How does that sound? Good. Okay, thanks very much. Okay. All right, so we've got some questions. So we're going to put some questions to you, and then after that we'll open it out to the floor, if that's all right. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. So I suppose my first one is, when did you move to Bermondsey, and what was your reason for moving there?
Well, I'll be completely honest. I came to London in 1970 and slept on a mattress on the floor in one of my friends, just like many of us did back in the day. And then happened to be in a queue. We all had to have lung x-rays for a lot of jobs to make sure we didn't have TB, which I don't think people sort of really know nowadays, but for many jobs you had to go and queue and get a certificate to show that you hadn't got TB, tuberculosis. So I was in the queue very briefly, met this chap. He said there are two girls looking for a flat, and the flat where I moved into, I was interviewed and got a room in a flat opposite Harrods in Knightsbridge, and found myself teaching in Bermondsey. And you can imagine the contrast of life from Knightsbridge, and you know, we were very involved with the rock and roll and fashion scene there. Not to say that Bermondsey wasn't back in the day either, because the Rolling Stones used to rehearse in Bermondsey Street. So that's part of the Lamp Post as well. A lot of people don't know that. But then I found it really appalling that 80 teachers at the Alwyn, some part-time, none of them lived in the area. The majority lived miles away, would come in by car or by public transport. And so I decided that I should move to where the school was. I felt really strongly that if you're a teacher, you should actually know what environment your children live in. So I managed by coincidence to find this another room being offered in a flat in Bermondsey Street. The chap was moving out, and it was a doctor. She was training at Guy's Hospital, and another person who was doing dentistry, so medical and dental, and I was a teacher. So I left Knightsbridge and moved to Bermondsey and haven't moved very far since. And I think, you know, when you're a teacher and living in the area, you get to know what's going on, you get to know what the families and who they are, and also for me it was a learning curve about discrimination and injustice, to be quite honest, because the budgets were low for the area at the time, and if you can imagine, this is the 70s when housing was appalling. Local facilities were appalling. There was a lot of bomb damage still, although it was the 70s. You know, there were, so we called them the dumps, but they were vacant, you know, derelict sites that had never been cleared all over the place. The docks were still in existence. I'm a geographer, so for me, when I was at the Alwyn, I would frequently think, oh, this is a really nice day outside, why don't we all just go out? So I used to take all my pupils out, and in those days we didn't have to have all the permissions. So I used to just leave with 30 kids and go for a walk down what was Surrey Canal, or walk to the docks and find out where things came from. And it was the biggest thing learning for me was to realise that we could learn from the outside as much as we could learn in the classroom. And at that time I also, living in Bermondsey, I joined a group of, I don't know whether you want to call them radical teachers, but we were a group that found ourselves across London because many of the teachers in the schools felt that it was okay and that a lot of the children really weren't worth teaching, whether it was to do with class or race. It was sort of pretty much the same, well, you know, we'll do a bit, but it wasn't aspirational. And so the group that found us, and I want to mention, because I was at her memorial, this lady, she became Dame Jocelyn Barrow, she died recently. She was extraordinary. We used to go and meet and work with working class teachers and teachers who were committed around the issue of discrimination and injustice around race. And this is 50 years ago. So I remember meeting her in London in 71, and she said, no, you'll come down and spend a day with me, not an hour or a day. And I found in my diary the entry, I went and spent a day with Jocelyn in Fursdown College, which was a teaching college, where she was pivotal in discussing those issues around race and class. So I think, moving to Bermondsey, understanding, and, obviously people would look at me in Bermondsey, and it was a completely working class, dock labour area, wonderful, wonderful people that I learnt a huge amount from. And to find that people were saying that, they were somehow different, and I just thought, this community, of poverty, but of amazing minds and brains, I found just amazing and learned a huge amount from them. So yes, I moved to Bermondsey, and I didn't want to move from where I lived, in fact. But so.
Okay, and so, and it's interesting you say that, because it's looking at that YouTube film. You'd get the impression listening to that man, from council, that sort of these children weren't worth even teaching. The way that he was talking about them, which is
well, yes,
awful to hear, but.
Yeah, I think it's wrong the way that they were always described. I mean, even
exactly.
the chap at the end is making comments that I find really, to this day, objectionable.
Yeah.
That there is, I can hear his voice in my head, and I actually do love the cutaway to the interviewer, because he's looking astonished. And in fact, David became a really good friend of the school subsequently, and he was equally horrified to hear those sort of remarks. So, yeah.
What was your experience as a teacher working in Alwyn? Which was
I love the girls there. If any of them are, I'm in touch with so many still.
Yeah.
And it was an extraordinary experience. I basically introduced some curriculum changes because Rosler came in, which is, for those of you who don't know, raising of the school leaving age. And I was part of the group that rewrote the curriculum for the extra year that children would stay at school. And one of the things I did in that was just something very simple, which was to say, you live in a flat or you live in a house, what goes in and what comes out, and base the curriculum around that. So if you all just imagine it for yourselves, electricity, gas, but they had to learn everything about where it came from, where it went, and then and that included the environmental issues of, making power from coal. Way back then we were doing that. But also that meant that I actually got them to learn about how to fill in forms, pay bills, but also how to fill in forms. And for one group, which they've just reminded me of recently, I got them to fill in passport forms, save money, and eventually I took them to Magaluf. So I took 30 Bermondsey girls, aged 15, with a fellow person who came to actually teach and was one of the founders of the Lamp Post, Andy Smythe. We took them to Magaluf. And I can't tell you, keeping track of 30 girls when boys are climbing the lamp post and climbing up the sort of guttering to get into the bedrooms all night for four days. We didn't sleep. We had to patrol because Bermondsey girls, as everybody knows, are Bermondsey girls, and they're very attractive. So, yeah.
Sounds like a time. Reading through some of the archives about Bermondsey Lamp Post, I understand the development of the school came out of a collaboration with the community. So how important was the community to the development of the school?
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm sitting here, but actually everybody should be sitting here. It's not about me, to be quite honest. It's about everybody who participated, from the nursery right up to, and it's not like the sort of type of thing we look at today, please come and join in the club, please come in. It's not about that. It was about complete sort of ownership of what was happening and the area. Because if you know, so many projects get funding from government for 3 years. So the first year, the community is sort of examined. The second year, the community is asked to lower its trust. And the third year, the project is finished and everybody leaves. And that's not what the philosophy of any of the free schools was. It was about the fact that the community had ownership. And today, I feel that, you know, buildings and people should have ownership of the projects that they invest in. So they should be invited, not just as a sort of an add-on, but as an integral part. So I went to look at a project on Saturday where the community helped design the interior of a community facility that had become derelict, had been rejuvenated, but actually by involving the local community in looking at the history and then them taking part in the artwork and all the integral work. And that was in Thamesmead. And when I was involved with the Bermondsey Centre, which sadly has just been boarded up, and I won't go into all the details, but that project was completely grassroots involvement, down to the colour of the floors, the types of tables, pink, the floor was green and the doors were mauve, and it was very much about integration. And with the lamp post, it's exactly the same. The curriculum, what we should be doing, and also the fact that parents, it was about their having the chance to have their second or third chance at education, because, you know, education should be for life. Should be you know, there should be a point where we can learn more, and I feel personally we should learn more. But with everybody who was involved with the lamppost, there were not stratified divisions. So I might be sitting here talking about it, but it's about there's a youth worker sitting here, Mina Temple, who was part of the lamppost. She might not have realised she was part of the lamppost, but Mina was the youth worker at Charterhouse and at the Ark, which was in Crosby Row, and she just swept up so many different parts of projects. And so it was about integrating everybody together and everybody, you know, and there were some difficult times, lack of money, lack of funding, all of those things.
Sounded like there was a lot of equality there between both the teachers, the volunteers and the parents.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
So I've got some questions as well. Okay. So the first free school of its type was Scotland Road School in Liverpool that started in 1970, and from there quite a few followed. There was 4 in London, including Bermondsey Lamp Post. So we're just wondering, like, how you were inspired by what became this free school movement and what made the Bermondsey Lamp Post School a free school.
Well, let me just say that when I was teaching at the Alwyn, I went up and worked at Liverpool Free School, and it was like a baptism of fire. First of all, being berated by the whole community about the clothes I wore, which were totally not acceptable. I won't
What were
use
you wearing?
Well, I just wore what I wore in London, but when I went, there I am, and I basically slept on a wooden floor with mice running over me, and there was no food. So we ate white bread and marge, and in the evenings we had Guinness and peanuts and cigarettes. I mean, that was the diet that we all had as volunteers there. And John Ord and I always get Bill's, I give him the wrong surname, but John Ord and Bill were just inspirational, as were all the other workers there. So we actually twinned with Liverpool. White Lion was slightly different to us, but obviously we worked with White Lion. Freightliners, which was in Camden. The Albany had, in the old Albany before it burnt down in the new Albany in Deptford, there was a project there which was run by somebody called Brenda, but that was amazing. There was another one in not Kidbrooke. It's the road. Anyway, there's another one in South London which is still going, but that was slightly. So we were all slightly different, because one of the good things was that we were responding to the environment. But Liverpool's environment was so much tougher, although Bermondsey was tough as well. I think it's more about the community's response, and I used to go up at weekends after I'd finished teaching to go up and work at Liverpool, and the Liverpool kids stayed opposite Harrods in my flat. My two flatmates weren't entirely suddenly to be invaded by Liverpool kids who, just a brief story, I come back and they're going, there's something you need to see, and this was in our little sort of front room, and there was a pile of goods, and I went to the Liverpool kids, what's all this? You can nick anything. And I thought, and I went, that's not what you've come down for. You've come down to look at, Parliament and all the serious stuff. They said, no, but there's security. And I went, and they said, well, we're not taking our back. We told we phoned our mums and dads. They're really pleased that we're going to bring back. So, but the Liverpool kids are, and I'm sorry that one of them isn't here today. Sadly, she's up in Liverpool at a funeral. Kim knows Debbie really well. The Liverpool families are still friends with the Bermondsey families and people who came to the Lamp Post, and they were such another learning curve and so lovely and amazing.
It's amazing because you're getting this image that it wasn't just like these isolated schools, but that you have like a network between all these children and teachers working together.
Yeah, very definitely. And I think we learned from each other. Sadly, John Ord, we were planning to have a big reunion with Liverpool. Sadly, John Ord died unexpectedly just before Christmas, which is really sad because we had a little exhibition up in Liverpool with photographs that were taken at the time in Liverpool. And it was down in for those of you who know Liverpool, at Liverpool 8. So it was one of the poorest communities. So yes, I mean, it would have been lovely. But I hope that we can still put a lot of those things back together again. Because I've heard back now from other teachers from Liverpool since he died.
What made the Bermondsey Lamp Post a free school? What sort of techniques or lessons would you do to make it a free school?
Well, I wrote a piece way back then called A Week in the Life, and I put it here because it sort of starts at 8:30 with somebody dropping off a baby to come to the nursery. And then it goes through till approximately 11 p.m. when we sent some people home because it was time that they finished their project. And this one says, and these aren't the real names, Laurie finished his project on the brain at 11 p.m. and we felt it was time for him to go home. So yes, projects would go on all day. And I mean, Kim, do you want to say anything about what a day was like? Because Kim's the other end of it. She wasn't there during the day.
I guess structure, I never coped very well with the structure when I was at my secondary school. So there was less structure, which made it good. I think it was just the relaxed atmosphere and the acceptance that you was worth teaching and come into the fold.
Because you travelled really far to get there.
Yeah, we had a waiting list.
I've come from Hastings today.
Wow. Oh, thank you.
How did you find out about the school?
I watched the programme on TV about the White Lion, and then somehow I went and had an interview with the head mistress at my secondary school, which was the first comprehensive school in South East London, 2,000 girls. So I came from a very small school to a very large school, and got the point. Oh yes, that's right. Okay. Someone's listening. And so I see the White Line programme, and then I managed to found Lois, and then I went to see her, and I begged her to come to school. She was really out of that catchment, Kim. I said, please, please. And then she went to see my parents, and the rest is history. I think there's no structure, and still doing things, and interest was shown in us. We felt like, I felt like I was not important, but you mattered.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did matter.
Yeah,
you still do matter.
You weren't a number, that's
Yeah. No, I think it is because, I teaching the Alwyn wasn't as 2000, but it was an amalgamated from two secondaries, and I was just shocked that a lot of the headmistress, who was lovely, hadn't fully realised that half the school, I taught my first form entry, 7 form entry, 35 children in each class. So I said, I'm going to teach them for a week so that I know and get a feel what level they're all at. And when I went to see her and said, look, half of them are finding reading and writing really difficult. And she went, no, absolutely, they're 11. Of course they can. And I thought, well, no. And in those days, things like dyslexia or we all talked about in this radical group about kinesthetic learning. There are 9 different ways that we learn. That some people learn visually, some people learn orally, and I'm a very visual learner. So much through my ears, probably forget it. But if I've seen it, I remember it. So I had difficulties with that. So when you've been through that yourself, you're going to be more receptive to understanding that we all learn differently. Yeah. And schools now do accept, but it still is so late looking at it. It's no good looking at 11 or 12 when kids have had to, not been realised that if you have maybe dyslexia, you have amazing spatial awareness, and that is a gift, and it's not even still labelled the gift. And I often used to say, way back then, I found out about the fact there's a school of architecture in America that tends to keep most of their places for young people with dyslexia, because they know that spatial awareness is one of the things that they can do much. I can't do that. I have to measure everything and look. So we all learn differently.
But luckily, changing the language around it now. It's no longer a disability or a learning need. It's just neurodiversity, which is great. You're touching on it just there, but could you tell us just more about the children? We saw a bit on the film about a bit about Ricky and about the other people going to a school. So without mentioning names, if you don't want to, it'd be great to hear.
Do you mean then or now?
Then, and then if you want to tell everyone about now as well, that could be good.
Well, the youngest was Sean. Sean's now, I think, in Birmingham. But Howie and Gary, they were 5 and 6. So, without sort of going through everybody's second names, but obviously everybody had different home circumstances. And I think if you're able to be nearer the family, then you can accommodate that. And I think when I went into television, one of the programs I was really keen that we did was on young carers, because I still think today we have no proper. We did a pack for school teachers when I was working at ITV, but many children have responsibilities around their family structure that isn't recognised, and that can upset how you deal with your school day. With the young people who came, we had, first of all, it started with teenagers, and they weren't all excluded from school. So the guy was saying at the end, it was, sorry?
Nonsense.
Yeah, it was complete nonsense. Thank you, Kim. I'd probably use a stronger word than that, but I mean, his analysis was that these children had psychiatric, this, that. No, that wasn't the situation. It was to do with, people not actually looking at how best, and I mean, if you've got 35 in a class, it is difficult to work individually, but you can do things. I mean, I remember with my classes, I would talk to the back row and talk to the front row first, separately, because I'm a back row person, and you chat, and it's usually to hide something that you can't do. And the front row often have, maybe hearing or sight problems that haven't been picked up. So, you can actually talk to a class and find out. But because child-centred teaching has become actually far more prevalent now, but back then it wasn't. It wasn't about. It was about giving the curriculum to the school, and some teachers might disagree with me from back then, but I think good teachers will always, and I've got nothing against teachers whatsoever, because everybody who goes into teaching goes in on the whole for the positive reasons of wanting to let young people and older people enjoy learning. But I wouldn't say that's always the case. But yes, I mean, just going back to some of them, then we had a sort of middle-aged group, and then we had the sort of older ones. But importantly, it was also about the parents, and also about parents having access again. So we actually joined up with Morley College, we joined up with adult education, because quite often, if your child is finding difficulties to read and you've got difficulties to read, then let's see what is available to help parents perhaps. And I'm so pleased that so many parents also went on to, one parent went on to become a counsellor for youth projects, other parents went on to do things that, they were not expected to do at all. And I think opening doors for all of the age groups, and it wasn't about, it was about finding who can help. So we had lots of volunteers, lots of people who came. I mean, the typewriter in that was donated by A.S. Neal, who founded Rising Hill, no, not Rising Hill, that's Michael Dwayne. He came down. He founded Summerhill, which was the first boarding free school. And he actually came to visit the project. We had so many actors who came and helped, so many groups who came. We did theatre with Mina. Do you remember Spare Tire, Mina? Yeah, so some of the top theatre groups Mina would have at the Arc, because theatre didn't come to Bermondsey. And then the Young Vic, we were so lucky with the Young Vic, because Frank Dunlop and Denise Coffey, who we are campaigning to have a plaque put there, maybe we should have one for you, Mina, and Crosby Row. But people like you and like Denise, they gave us space. Sam Wanamaker gave us space. Sam actually lent us his puppets. I don't know whether you remember them, Kim, but he lent us his Victorian puppets. And I think in the exhibition there's a frying pan from Punch and Judy, which I forgot to give back. Sam, I'm sorry. But he said you can borrow them, but he also lent us costumes. And before the Globe Theatre was built, he had a little sort of, on that patch, there was a sort of semi-stage made, and he put what's called a tilt, a blue awning over the top. And us, the Lamp Post, could go and perform on it. So, we were there before the Globe performing, and we actually put graffiti along by the river saying Bermondsey Lamp Post. And everybody signed their names because Sam was supportive. The Young Vic, that's Gary pulling me into the Young Vic first ever theatre visit. And he, Denise and Frank Dunlop, let us use one of their theatre spaces for rehearsals. They gave us free tickets. We had free tickets all over London. We campaigned to get free tickets because, why can't kids go to the ballet? And the ballet, for those of you who know, was Alwyn Secondary, which was the very first performance of a black ballet company in this country. And I'll tell you very briefly, I said we're going to the ballet. We're not going to no ballet. And I said we're all going to the ballet. And we all went to the ballet at Sadler's Wells. And Alwyn Secondary was, anyway.
Because that's still talked about now, that performance.
Yeah, so we all sat there like this, and I looked along the row, I'll never forget it. They're all like, this is going to be, And as it started, I have never seen such body language change. Their arms went back, their shoulders went down, and when they finished, every child was up, and I mean, they were up through the performance anyway, but they were up and clapping, and I mean, I know that it's influenced some of them to go on and take some of the best classes in this in London. But yes, I mean, going to things like that was sort of unheard of. And just getting out of Bermondsey. I mean, we were fed by Borough Market, for those of you who know the market. I used to go down there, gave us free fruit, free vegetables, and so one of the classic dishes on a Sunday, because nobody had any money left by Sunday for food, we're in the same situation in the 70s as we are now, with no food, and so we used to make Bermondsey bake, which was the vegetables with mashed potato and cheese on the top, big square things of it, and take it to the park, and Bermondsey crumble, which was all the fruit from the market with crumble on the top, and that fed so many people.
Amazing.
So things like that, where local people helped, local people were part of what was happening and helping. So, and the market guys were great. They said, we've got this for you, we've got that secondary use, and just like people are doing today, there was 3-day strikes. There was no. We had. Did we have We had blackouts, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yep. So candles and fires and all of those things. And we also, just out of interest, we were part of the Adventure Playground movement too, and I've found the designs for adventure playgrounds by some of the children. So it was interactive. So it wasn't just about schoolwork and you can design a playground, you can decide on the menus, you can. So it's about participating in what is going on in life rather than, it being outside.
Yeah. That they're involved in the community
Yes.
too. Yeah.
And also you want me to mention dissections. The smoking thing, just so that I didn't like to say it when I was interviewed, but we actually had a lung from Guy's Hospital of a smoker, which everybody could look at and see the damage that smoking had caused.
I think I missed that. Sorry? I think I missed that. But I do vape.
So yes, so we did have strange. It wasn't strange, and I think the other important thing is it's not just about education in school. Health was one of the most important things, and I kept every family. We looked at what else was needed. So whether it was the mother, father, siblings, or whatever, whether it was teeth, whether it was health issues, and then how do we help support all those things taking place? And we had the most amazing support from a health visitor known as Ty. For those of you, do you remember Miss Tyson? Bowler hat. Miss Tyson wore a bowler hat. She came from a very privileged background. She taught me so much. She would go into a house with me and say, do not look around. These are people, and we're here to help people, and we're here to listen. And she was just phenomenal in sourcing holidays, times away for people, making sure that things like nits and teeth and all the issues to do with poverty were taken care of. There were not toilets in the house. Many of the blocks had toilets across the block. So you might have a sink on the landing, you'd have some water in your house, but your toilet was across the yard. So, when you look at Guinness, which is near Guy's at the moment, toilets were across the yard. If you looked at some of them that have been pulled down, like, Devon Mansions is still there, they all had toilets across the yard. They weren't in your flat. A lot of the flats were renovated, but they weren't renovated in a way that the facades were done, but still, the facilities weren't there. So, yes, things like that. It was just so very different. So I'm sorry, I'm going.
It's amazing.
Your
it's
take,
amazing.
So interesting. Like, you have so many stories. I've heard it a few times. And every time I see you, you have like something new to say. So there just must be so much. But thinking about that and thinking about all the things that you did and all the people that you worked with, what for you are the legacies of the Bermondsey Lamp Post?
I think I think it's really difficult. There are obviously people are the most important, but also I think the health legacy, because we actually did the very first, because of our Dr. Sue Dowling, now Hannam. Sue was integral, to the whole project, and she ensured that for the first time ever, Guy's medical students did 3 months at grassroots in the community. And then when she became Dean of Medicine at Bristol, she took that on a more national basis. And we were part of a lot of the Bristol health work, which she's just sent me a note saying, gosh, I've reread, and we need to maybe republish some of the initiatives that were around health. And as we all know, you can't get a GP now. We've got issues around, health going on at the moment with people in poverty. So I think health is one of the legacies, because most doctors now do 3 months as part of their training in communities. Also buildings, our physical buildings. I mean, Southwark has labelled Tanner Park on the corner, but we actually occupied that so that it wasn't built on. And Mint Street, we were involved with North Southwark Community Development Group and Mint Street and the playground that is there now and the park, and keeping that and keeping the wall of people probably don't know that was the wall of the original Children's Hospital there. And then obviously some people were part of Coin Street, and in fact some of the Lamp Post opened the first Coin Street Festival and performed at it. And we did the very first street party in Bermondsey Street, which is now Bermondsey Street Festival, which has been cancelled sadly this weekend, understandably. And for that festival, we actually ran a lead out of my flat to power the band, and one of the mothers closed the road rather efficiently, so we didn't get permission, so we closed the whole centre of Bermondsey Street, where they've now put up some little funny things recently, but we closed that area and had the most amazing street party with the Woolpack on one side and what was then the Yorkshire Grey on the other. So the whole community closed that road, had their street party, and that was amazing. So there are lots of other legacies.
And the pupils themselves, of course.
Well, that's the most important one for me, is the people, all the adults, children. And there are many that I would love to know where they are. Some sadly are no longer alive. But the ones that are, I mean, I'm so glad you're here, Kim. I know Ricky was hoping to come tonight, but there are lots of others that I'm still in touch with, and they're in touch with each other. So yes, I think that's the most, for me, it's seeing how, and what everybody's all doing. Kim's helping run a museum.
Well done, Kim.
So yes, so I think that's
Amazing.
Thank you. We're going to open it up to floor now, so I guess if you've got a question for Lois, we'd love to hear it. Yeah, up front.
Lois, what are you doing now then? What's your world like now?
well, it's interesting. 2 grandchildren, as you probably who've already made an appearance. Right, I work across grassroots into the creative industries. So when I was at ITV, I was involved very much around Carlton Television originally was the only company that gave £500,000, not fundraised, out of its company money, back to local communities. So I was obviously really involved with that, and making programmes about social issues and injustice. And in fact, Sonia's here from a project that I was involved with. How long ago was it, Sonia? Well, it was a wonderful project, a grassroots project involving 11 different groups, wasn't it?
Called Stanmore.
Yeah.
2009.
2009. And that was a changing community, and that was, I was involved on the filming side and also on some of the other parts, but it was involving graffiti artists, an extraordinary, amazing project. Other things, going with young people to make their own films in Jamaica on slavery, going to Uganda, right up to the north on the border with South Sudan, with young people making film with the young people there who were all girl soldiers. So it's very much about, grassroots and access, because injustice is still there, race, class, still there, sadly. So to me, they're, things that still huge amount of work to do, and still, and just having the opportunity to, make your way through.
So funny you mentioned Carlton. I come from Salford, and in the 80s, at the age of 12, I saw Salford's first community video workshop in the church basement, and it wasn't until 18 and I introduced myself to Granada that they educated me as a filmmaker now.
Yeah.
But from 17, 18, 19, Granada was similar to your Carlton, and I always remember that I was so happy to introduce myself to Granada than the BBC, because the BBC wouldn't give me the time of day.
No, you're right. I mean, I used to come up to Granada because I used to work on grassroots and some of the big campaigns we had, and part of my job was to look at what campaigns we should have. So I used to come up to Granada because, and then to Yorkshire and all of them. And also, one of the best training workshops was in the Midlands from ITV. I mean, sadly, because of the way that the public service broadcasting remit was taken out of ITV, they do less. But we had one of the only in-house training units, the only one in the country in my unit. We used to call them the nursery, but they've gone on to do amazing things. And they came from very different backgrounds than the usual intake. And I mean, Asif made the film about Amy Winehouse, and he trained in our unit. So people, whatever job you're in, whatever corporate environment you're in, and I work partly around corporates and the fact that they've got even more detailed reporting that they've got to do. But it doesn't make any difference if you're a media company or whoever you are. Your green-eyed environment should not be greenwashing, and your social impact should not be social washing. And sadly, a lot of them try to say it is. So I'm looking at how do we expose the companies that aren't taking those things about class and race and
Any other questions there?
What's happened to the free school movement now? And the other thing, they mentioned the Islington School, and I think I remember that in the sentence. There was a huge row in the papers about it.
yeah.
I do know firsthand because I went there at that time. My friend was being trained there. And I think the reason why everybody came from Southwark is it was an IRA, the IRA round.
Yeah, it's probably all at the LMA. Yeah, I mean, I found a school report at the National Archives.
Yes. we had a school inspection from the DES, which we felt went very well, which they felt was up. And I mean, I have to laugh because, were you there for the school inspection? It was in the bakery.
No.
So we had a bakery in Long Lane, 184, which Southwark gave to us and then took away overnight with the police. That's a whole other story. But when the DS came, there was two men and a woman, and I'll never forget it because they came in completely suited and booted, and the woman had pearls and a twin set. So immediately there was sort of reaction from all the young people, and one of them told an elaborate story about, I don't know quite how to put it, but we all remember it because she told a very elaborate story, and the woman totally didn't understand what it was about, but all the children did. And so some of the things in the report, they never showed her their work or anything. But with the free schools today, most of it is legacy, although Kirkdale was the one I was trying to remember. Kirkdale still
Sydenham,
exists.
yeah.
And that was, I think, I am absolutely 99% sure that the present free school, use of the term free school, which David Cameron introduced, I was called in by the Tories to talk about education, and I've never had such a difficult day crossing into a Tory sort of think tank, but I did. But I am 99% sure they borrowed the term free schools for the free schools today.
A bit like fair rents.
Sorry?
A bit like fair rents.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, so, and they're nothing like what we were talking about. They just used the name. Because it wasn't about the freedom of the child, and it's more about the child-centred learning more than anything.
Yeah.
And adult-centred learning, learning from, where you're at and then going forward. So,
But without rules, you know.
Yes.
Because what came across for me in that film, and also reading the school report, which they were quite damning about, but they didn't get it.
No.
Is what I could read. They just didn't get the
No.
concept of the school, which is if you allow the child to lead the learning, they are going to learn.
yeah.
You know, and but they didn't get
No,
that.
and I think trying to explain to them that we had a breakout room for difficult times, and we had an afternoon session on a Friday, where it was free discussion about anything that people, you know, whether it was around homophobia, or whether it's around race, and, you know, because you know, if you're looking at the whole society and the whole families and everything, those issues people need to talk about them.
Yeah.
So we had Friday afternoons was a sort of, you know, that sort of opportunity to discuss what people were concerned about, whether their parents held the same view, who held what view, you know, and I think that was important.
Thank you so much. This has just been brilliant. I mean, I want to ask you a little bit about two questions really. One about housing and how the impact housing had on, I suppose, your life, with the lives of the children that attended, and just can you explain what the last day of the school was like?
The last day of Lamp Post School as you.
It's never ended.
It's never ended.
It's
Thank you,
We're still in the
No, it has never ended.
Ah,
As my
elaborate
children
on
who
that.
are here will testify.
Wow.
Can you
They've
elaborate
had to
on
live
that?
through it all.
That is amazing.
Well,
Sorry, I just thought it was
I mean, basically, no, it hasn't really, because a lot of the projects are still ongoing, but I've had young people, I still have parents call me, I still have people needing advice about education otherwise, taking their kids out of school,
This is the
you know,
legacies
what that
then.
all means,
Yeah,
you know,
this is-
and that's the same thing.
yeah.
In terms of housing, Southwark's got a huge housing problem at the moment. Southwark had a huge housing problem then, and I would say that more people are on the waiting list, partly because of government policy to allow council and social housing to be sold off, or council housing to be sold off first. And I think that's caused havoc now. But back then, at least if you lived on one estate, you could probably there was a sisters and brothers and children's policy that helped with social cohesion in terms of certain aspects where the grandmother might be nearby and could help look after the children, and but people could get housing. It could also cause problems where you didn't really want to be near your family either, which is equally understandable.
That got banned though because it was racist.
Sorry?
I was a housing officer.
Oh, where were you a housing officer?
Well, a housing officer at the GLC
Ah.
and in Wandsworth and up north, and also last year in Lambeth.
So you know, yeah.
So in Wandsworth, I remember them banning, it was called Sons and Daughters Scheme, because
That's
what happened was that white families were in the best estates, and so their sons and daughters got it. So it wasn't originally meant as a racist way
No.
of allocating housing, but in effect that's what it did.
Yeah.
So white families end up getting all the best housing, and the black families
Well, it was also because they were there first. But I mean, when we look at what happened with the housing, you know, from 1950s and Windrush and who was allowed to be housed, they weren't on the housing ladder. So I absolutely agree with you. It was, and it's the same in Bermondsey, because Bermondsey was a very white area at the time in the 70s.
Fascist activity there.
Well, National Front, yeah. I had to deal with that a lot because they would come to me and the other volunteers, and I think that says something quite a lot actually at the time, because we weren't discriminating. So I got spat at. I mean, there were some things that were really difficult at the time. Because there were isolated families, so in terms of housing, I became a governor of Bacon School, and we had to deal with stuff within the school there. There was only, it was lovely to see him actually. He's now on Lewisham's council, but the maths teacher there had massive, he's still a friend, Jimmy. I mean, he was black, so he was in Bacon School, which was virtually all, and they actually discriminated so badly against the black students at Bacon's when I was school governor. I mean, it was appalling because they were still beating the kids. It was just before it was banned.
You mean like with the cane and stuff?
Yeah, but they didn't. They're supposed to put it in the book. They're supposed to write down when you caned a boy, and they were doing it without writing it in the book. And it was obviously often against the few black kids that were there. So there was. It's so difficult to explain, some of those things. But I think, and also what you're saying about the housing, yeah, absolutely, that it was, I'm looking at things like Charterhouse, which people who know about Southwark's housing history, do you remember Chaucer, Mina? And we had the blockade and the burning of the building didn't burn down, did it? But it was, everybody had to be rehoused.
Yes.
But people set fire to cars. I mean, it was appalling housing, absolutely appalling.
I
And
mean,
it
I was
was-
more involved in Lambeth.
Yeah, and it was halfway housing deemed, for difficult families, and they weren't difficult families. It was just that they maybe hadn't paid a bill or whatever. So it was a really harsh environment, really harsh. And I mean, I'm virtually in touch with all of the Chaucer House families still, because I mean, it was just such a horrible, horrible situation for them, and they were militant, which was, I quite understand and agree with, to be quite honest.
The school as it was in the form that we saw in the film, how did that move on to the form it is now?
Okay, well, basically we were housed temporarily at Charterhouse, which you saw, and then we were offered the bakery at 184 Long Lane, and the bakery was a bakery, and I've still got the baking tins at home. They've got Hovis on them. Anyway, it was a Bermondsey bakery, and we moved in there, and it was great because we had the opportunity to fundraise and build kitchens. We had rooms that I actually did all the fireproofing with Dell and some other people, but we fireproofed with asbestos, which we were told to do, and we drilled and put it all up ourselves. I mean, I just love the fact, here's the asbestos, can you put it out? Yes, we'll do it ourselves. So, yep, we dealt with asbestos, but, and then when I was 17 and 18, I was involved with the work camps abroad, working in France, Switzerland, and then Morocco, working internationally with fellow volunteers, building schools or whatever needed doing in the community. So we then got IVS involved with the Lamp Post, and we had students and young people come from all over Europe to do the conversion of part of the Long Lane building and to build adventure playgrounds, because we were part of this. There are many that are still existing, so the one for young people with disabilities, because that was another area that we looked at in the school, was disability at the home, because that's often, with children or with parents. But so anyway, they all arrived from all over Europe, and then Southwark sent the police in and said that we didn't have authorization, and I know exactly who organised that, to have international people in the building.
Okay.
And so the police came, and we had to find housing for all those people who'd come to help. Suddenly, families had to take in students and young people from across Europe, and they boarded up the Long Lane building and said we couldn't go back in there. So
And
that
the
was
of your building, your property.
yeah. So that was really dramatic, but we carried on back to 104, and we had people come from this side of Walworth as well who came. One of them is now the only way is Essex. She's their production manager. I love all this. I didn't do that, but you know, so we carried on because it's more like a movement.
Yeah.
So the physical space was taken away by the police in numbers, and we had to, you know, find somewhere. Do you remember that, Mina?
No.
You don't remember having to? No. Yeah. I think possibly.
Mina, do you have any fond memories that you can tell us about your collaboration with the school?
Well, I mean, actually listening to Lois and remembering about Spare Tire and the other plays that would come and use the Ark. She was always very warm and welcoming, and you could always get a cup of tea if you wandered around the lamppost. And I still walk down Bermondsey Street and look for where the lamppost is and remember those times. There was some crossover with families, and families were involved with Lois and also were involved with things that were happening at Charterhouse.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I've not got much to share.
No,
It's
that's
all
fine.
in the mists of
That's
time.
fine. Yeah. We are having to come to the end, but Lois, I just would really
Can I
like
ask
you
one
to.
question?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, in the film it said that you had children from 3 years old. At that age, were they thrown out of a nursery or they just didn't fit in society?
Basically, it's quite interesting. It's a really important question, that, because when we were sort of learning as well, because we know we were all coming from different backgrounds, different qualifications as well. So we had primary school teacher, we had people coming from theatre, from arts and everything. And we were working very closely with a really amazing guy called Ronnie McKeith, who was a professor at Guy's Hospital. And he and his fellow Martin Bax and others had done a huge amount about early years learning under 5. And it was like a penny dropped, that if you don't do stuff when children are under 5, then, you know, the later years you've got a lot of other things that need to be supported. And so we then realised that if there was a family that perhaps the older children were coming, that we should incorporate the younger children as well. So it was really, and it was actually we had so much support around that, and I think that went on. It's an interesting question, because I think it went on to formulate policies about early years childhood learning, and also the previous government who did the which have gone now, but the early learning centres that were set up, and you know, recognising that. And I think those doctors and those psychiatrists and those people who recognised about how important it is under 5 as it is, and I don't want to say 5 because obviously it's throughout life learning, but that was really really important, and we realised that we could do so much with that age group as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, well, thank you for asking it, because I you know, it was probably one of the most important, for me, one of the most important learning curves as well.
I wanted to ask you, looking back now, would you have done anything differently?
No. No, because I learnt, and so did we all. I mean, I can, you know, it's been lovely talking to Dr. Sue, Rena, who did all the plays. She's now a playwright. She was a young volunteer, and she just phoned up and said, "Can I come and help?" And we had a ridiculous old school telephone conversation. Barbara, who's now a ceramicist, you know, they all came and helped, and they're still some of my closest and best friends, but also they've gone on to develop things, and then all the young people as well. So, but also the Alwyn girls that I taught, absolutely love them all as well.
Yeah,
So
still in touch with her.
Yeah.
Amazing.
yeah, I just
Yeah.
think, you know, no.
No.
was a bit of a nightmare.
Well,
but
I think
no.
that says it all, doesn't it? Yeah, I think that says it all. It's been an absolute
And I just want to
pleasure,
thank
so
my
really.
three who are here, because they had to grow up with this. and my grandchildren. So,
Yeah.
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 I don't know what, they probably want to ask lots of questions.
Yeah,
on.
go on. Oh. Yeah. Proud kids. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, thank you so much. I'm completely overwhelmed and blown away by it all, really. I don't know how other people feel, but it's certainly worth putting into words in a book or something. You know, it's worthy of it. I really do think so. Yeah, thank you so much.
Can I actually say one?
Yeah.
The only thing I would say to kind of full circle it
Yeah.
a bit is that there's so much positivity in what one says and the people that have enriched our lives and enriched each other's.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that you've done this and are archiving and highlighting for the fundamental reason that I have two little ones who are entering and have entered the educational systems, and I actually feel that we have made worse problems than we did then, because we've implemented stuff that's set in stone. Like we've got academy systems where you've got literally where Kim was talking about becoming a number, it's literally written in stone now that you are a number. You channel into this big factory and you channel out again. There may be policies in place, but they're about the policies, not about the individuals, not about the children. And I only had my eyes open to that through my own experience in education, but sadly I'm finding that now with my own children. So it's a massive positive, but I just wish that positive had been taken in more
Yeah.
into the structure of
Into
things
the
that we
mainstream
are.
issue, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think we are today failing unless you've
So
helped
many.
out and you've got money
Sure.
or something, or you get very lucky and you have a teacher who
Like Lois
Yeah,
comes along
exactly.
Yeah.
and saves the day.
Yeah.
But even the Loises are sadly being promised.
They're few and far
Yeah.
between.
Yeah. So that's my only thing is it's a matter of that I'm glad you're here, and I wish there could be more of a spotlight just so that we could maybe put some changes into what is the system now.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
No, I agree. Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. I'm going to leave the last word to you, Lois.
Oh, well,
Before
just
we
thank
wrap
you
up.
for coming. And those of you who haven't asked any questions, I would really, love to hear if you do have any.
Yeah. Thank
I
you,
do too.
everybody, for coming. And
Yeah,
thank you, Lois.
thank you.